I suffered with stress-induced anxiety and depression through burnout. It was like just an absolute firestorm of emotion, and it was a really scary time. I lived in Hazelmere, just outside Guildford. The internet wasn't working properly, so the internet went down. I got so fed up that I was like, I'm starting a broadband company. I'm Duncan, I'm the CEO and founder of Brillband.
You've came from frustration, burnout, a broken system, and decided that you wanted to do something better.
I still to this day feel like customers are being ripped off. It felt great. You will be the person that will make your business successful, and success doesn't necessarily mean money. Most entrepreneurs do fail. Most businesses do fail, that's just fact. But what you learn from that and what you can take or bring to the next opportunity is invaluable.
When was the last time you thought about calling it quits? Welcome back to Focus on Founders. I'm Matthew Adams. This is a show where we go beyond the highlight reel and find out what it's actually like to be a business owner. Today's guest is...
I'm Duncan. I'm the CEO and founder of Brillband.
Most people will know you today from what you've done with Brillband, but you didn't necessarily come from that space. You've came from frustration, burnout, a broken system, and decided that you wanted to do something better, which I'm really excited to get into. Before we start every episode with the founder Fastfire.
Okay.
So what that is 9 questions, fast answers, don't think about it, just the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
We ready?
No.
So when was the last time you thought about calling it quits?
Probably yesterday.
The most random place you've took a business call?
Finland Airport. I can't remember what it's called.
The early riser or night owl?
Early riser.
One truth business people rarely say out loud?
One truth business people really say out loud, it sucks.
A quote or phrase that you actually live by?
Honesty and integrity all the time.
One app you couldn't run your business without?
ChatGPT.
Weirdest piece of advice you've ever been given?
Ooh. I don't even know. I actually don't know. Do you know what? Pass it up. That's what it was. The weirdest piece of advice at the time, it was just pass it up by one of my investors.
Okay.
I can contextualise it if you want me to.
We'll get on to it.
All right.
First call when everything's going wrong?
Ollie.
And in one sentence, what makes a great founder?
Tenacity.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for playing Fastfire Founder.
That's all right.
There you go. Get the brain going nice and early. This episode is brought to you by dussl. dussl is a premium, gender-neutral skincare brand founded here in Glasgow by Fraser. It's 5-star rated and recommended by GQ. If you want to grab yourself some of the dussl product range, use code FOCUS15 and that'll get you 15% off the range. Anyway, we'll get into the story now, and I think it's important for us to kind of get a picture about who you were throughout your full life. Growing up, before business, before broadband was even kind of on your radar, who were you? What were you doing? What were you like?
Yeah, cool. I mean, as a kid, I was a little bit shy at first, particularly in primary school. I went through bullying and all that stuff. Then secondary school, that was really where I found myself. I wasn't bullied there. I had an amazing time at secondary school. It was wicked. I discovered rugby, discovered my confidence, discovered acting, was able to just become who I am. And they're really instilled. I went to a Quaker school, so honesty, integrity, equality are 3 sort of real core principles of Quakerism. I'm not a Quaker per se, but I took those 3 things and I lived by those. Came out of school. I wanted to go to drama school. So I went through the drama school auditions. Got into I was first reserve of Royal Welsh Academy Dramatic, dramatic art, and it was the year that tuition fees went up. So no one pulled out. So then it was back to square one, and I met a girl, as you do, and I decided not to go to drama school, and I moved in with her, and I got a job, and that was selling gym memberships. Mm-hmm. So I was selling gym memberships. Did that for a month, got fired. Then worked in a pub for a month, and then the place where I got fired from, a place called Gym Box, Mark Diapa fired me from there. He's now like CEO of Fitness First in Dubai. But he was a really cool guy, to be fair. And It was actually the founder that I'd missed a tear on a seat, and the founder did not accept that. And I was a young guy. I was only 19. Made a mistake, but that was it. Gone. I'd missed my sales quota as well, and to be honest, I was out of my depth. But they said that Virgin Active would be a great place for me to be, a great place for me to go and learn and hone my skills. And my late grandfather, always told me that in order to be a good businessman, you needed to know how to sell. And so I was like, right, well, let's go and do that then. Let's learn how to sell, because I can go to university and get myself into a shed ton of debt and have no life experience, or I can actually go learn the hard way. So after I worked in the pub for a month, I managed to get a job at Virgin Active Twickenham, which was one of they called them Virgin Active Classic clubs at the time. It's one of their premium clubs, and it was in the stadium, and we were selling gym memberships in there. And I remember I had a Polish manager called Anya, and she was formidable. She took no nonsense. One of the best managers I've ever had. She was formidable, very protective, but ruthless. And so I missed my targets first 2 months. Third month, she's like, Duncan, I'm not going to do the accent. I'll get cancelled. Duncan, if you don't hit your target this month, you're gone. And I was like, not again. I can't get fired again. So I was like, pulled my socks up, tried everything, picking up the phone, start dialing, but I did it, hit the target. And then I worked my way through Virgin. I was very cocky. I was a cocky young 21-year-old. 19, 20, 21-year-old. So I was 19 when I got that job there. At 21, I was the youngest sales manager that they had. And I was managing, at the time, what was considered their global flagship. So it was a club called Chiswick Riverside. So to join the club was, at the time, £250 a month with a £500 joining fee per person. Average family was spending 24 grand a year just at the gym, right? So, then I didn't like what I was getting paid. I needed to change, and then someone recommended me to go and work for Gartner. So cocky, young guy, go work for Gartner, got fired.
Didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work out there. And then I ended up working in a startup called Henchman, which was actually, if you think about gorillas, right? I know they're not doing great, but they were doing 1 hour delivery in Paris initially, and then they went on and grew to become a global brand. Well, Henchman was doing exactly that, but this is 2015, 2016 in London.
Right.
And they were doing it really well. And it was the start of what is now the big AI boom. They were using AI routing technology to make sure that we could get drivers from A to B without them sitting doing nothing. The biggest killer to those businesses is what we call driver dwell time. So drivers just sitting doing nothing. That's where you're hemorrhaging your cash. Because at the time we were paying our drivers, unlike Uber, not pay per drop. We were paying them a salary.
Right.
Now, obviously Uber now has to pay people a salary, but that was really, intuitive thinking. And the CEO there was Ryan Pereira, awesome guy, lives in Canada now. He was just so passionate about creating, again, a fair environment, no matter who or where you were in the organization. Still, I was very cocky at that point. I needed to have my wings clipped a wee bit. And I did. I think through that, you start to learn. But I think you do need a little bit of cockiness in your early 20s to get you through it. And then, set up Raising Partners with Helena in 2017, I think that was.
Right.
Yeah. And that was when we were supporting startups raising investment across the UK.
This is an interesting topic I want to touch on later.
Yeah, you can, absolutely.
But it's such an evolution, and I think a few of the points I wanted to touch on from what you were saying there is obviously struggling first off through primary school and being able to adapt in secondary, and deciding that the right course of path wasn't actually to go to university, even though you didn't necessarily have a thought process of starting a business at that stage. Why was that? What was kind of the plan there, or was there a plan?
Yeah, I think to me, right, even when I was younger, I saw university as a place you would go to, particularly when they announced the tuition fees. So I was in sixth form when they did that. So, they announced the tuition fees, and you're thinking, well, if I'm going to be investing that much money to go somewhere, I really need to be walking into a job that's going to pay me a lot of money. Now, the only jobs that I could think of that required a university degree at the time, and I still believe this, was, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being a veterinarian, being a dentist. It's those types of professions where you do need a degree and you do need to go and learn, really important things so you don't end up hurting someone or you don't end up falling foul of the law. Or scientists, so do I need to go and do that to do well in business? I don't think so. I think actually lived experience is hugely valuable. And the best thing I think I did was make as many mistakes as I did getting fired. I speak to some people who say, I've never been fired before. They wear it as a badge of honor. And I'm like, well, actually it's quite good to be fired. You have to struggle. You have to learn. You have to adapt. You have to get better. And, the struggle was real. Like I was on a £16,000 salary living in London. I had to double my salary to basically pay my rent. Like there were months where I didn't hit my target and my phone bill would be cut off mid-month. I remember I worked in Barbican, so I got promotion to go be senior sales in Barbican. I was awful at it, to be honest with you. I wasn't good at Barbican. I was traveling so long though. I was traveling 2.5 hours into work and 2.5 hours back. So my commute in a day was 5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, I was train hopping as well. I couldn't afford the train because it was from Martin's Heron, which is a place just in between Ascot and Bracknell. So an hour on the train there into Waterloo, and then from Waterloo to Barbican another hour. And it was insane. And I was eating, like, at one point I had just bread in my drawer with barbecue sauce and ham in the little fridge. We worked in an office that was probably, a quarter the size of this room with no windows with 5 people in it. And then you were just doing gym tours consistently. And then you just go out. You'd go out after work because with the gym you had like partnerships. So like bars would put on things for you and you'd go and attend. There'd be a bucket of drinks, the PTs, we were there. And then you'd go home again and just think, oh, this is hell.
It's quite a cycle to get into, isn't it? Like that way of life. And I think a sales environment is traditionally thought like that in terms of going out drinking, all the other stuff associated with it as well.
Hey, whoa, I'm clean. Thank you very much.
But in terms of it's a fast pace, it's constantly on the go, these things are going on, and it's a high pressure environment as well. Sure. How did that sort of take its toll kind of like on you? Were you able to deal with that? Because like even the 2.5 hour commute there and back, plus all this other stuff going on.
Yeah, I just adapted. You just deal with it. That's life. You put one foot in front of the other. And that was really, really important. Like I think one thing, it really annoys me when people look down on younger people. And you see it with children, right? They're the most resilient people. They adapt to their situation almost instantly. You look at young kids as they're playing in a playground, they have an argument or something happens to them. They have a bit of an upset. They have a bit of a cry about it. But within 5 minutes, they're best friends again. Mm-hmm. And you see them, they're learning all the time, right? They'll go to an English lesson. They've got a really difficult word, but then they get through it. And I think as we get older, we can get a bit complacent and we look down on people like that. We say, oh, they can't do that, or their problem isn't as difficult as the situation we were in. Well, actually, it probably is exactly the same. And they're going through all of the things that we had to go through or I had to go through. So, no, I think that young people are able to adapt. Yes, there's always going to be people that are complacent in the world, but I think when you're young, you can adapt quite quickly. I think that the really important thing is actually using that time to make mistakes and learn from them and build that resilience that you will need if you ever want to go on and launch a business. Because, and again, I think it's why we see a lot of young entrepreneurs is because you've got the ability to sort of sweep it under the carpet. It does catch up with you. It caught up with me.
Yeah.
But, I think being young at that time just was the reason why I could do it.
And I think on that note, there comes like a time for every kind of young person where they hit kind of that kind of crossroad, maybe leaving school, leaving uni, or deciding, do I go to uni? Do I get a job? Do I start a business? From your experience of going out there, not going to uni because you didn't think it was necessary, getting the sales job and learning those skills to then start a business, what would be your advice in terms of someone who's maybe got those ambitions? What do you think would be a good step for them?
I think just throw yourself into it. I think the worst thing that you can do particularly when you're young, is to hesitate, make the mistakes, go and live, go and experience these things now while you can, because it is. You hear it all the time when you're younger. You go, yeah, well, that's not going to be me. But the reality is that you use that time. Don't worry about the cash. Don't worry about those things. Provided you're doing something that you love and you feel is right, then attack it, because the money will come. And there's no point living regretting that decision or not doing that decision later on down the line. I think it's really important. Most entrepreneurs do fail. Most businesses do fail. That's just fact. But what you learn from that and what you can take or bring to the next opportunity is invaluable. And investors, as well as employers, love that stuff. Provided you can translate those experiences into their workplace without causing too much problems.
Right. Okay. That's a great bit of advice. I think often I hear from a lot of young people starting out businesses, or have even been in business for a couple of years and it's still getting off the ground. There's that worry to make a mistake, because how does that then reflect on the overall business? Does that make them lose credibility? Like, in terms of that side of things, then how can you make a mistake comfortably without worrying about the overall impact?
I think humility. So I think if you make a mistake, you own it. I think people that make mistakes and try to brush over them or pretend that they didn't happen, that's where you lose credibility. Because that's when people talk behind your back and go, well, I'm not allowed to make a mistake, but he is, and he just hides it. So own your mistakes, be honest. And I said something earlier, you asked me one of those quick fire questions, what's that piece of advice? And it was pass it up. And pass it up was given to me by a man named David Roseman, the executive chairman of Macquarie Capital. He was one of the investors in Brillband, one of the private angel investors. And we went for dinner. And this guy is awesome. Like, turns up, he's wearing, he turns up on a Lime bike. Bear in mind, this man has a house in Belgravia. He owns a house in Ibiza. He's got, the net worth is insane.
I mean, you've got to have that net worth to be riding Lime bikes. I've seen the price of them.
Well, he turns up on this Lime bike, right? And he turns up on this Lime bike, and he's got his leather jacket on. And it's almost like a suit jacket. He struts in, he's got his jeans on, Aussie. And he's brilliant. And he sits down, I really like your jacket. And he's like, yeah, I got it from a thrift store. I was like, what? Who is this guy, man? Like, he's just invested some serious capital into my business. And he just turned up on a bike, sits down. We're going for drinks. Or like the woman comes around, the waitress at the time came around and asked, what do you want to drink? It's like red wine with ice. I'm like, what is this? Like, he's like, yeah, in Australia we drink red wine with ice. And I was like, this man knows what he's talking about.
Just plays by his own rules.
Yeah, exactly. He just doesn't care. He's just being himself. And then he gets on to, so what are you going to do? He's talking to me. And he said, one piece of advice I can give you, Duncan, is to pass it up. And what do I mean by that is if you make a mistake, or if something gets too difficult, or you're stuck, pass it up. And he was like, you've got Ollie there. So Ollie was one of my other investors. Brilliant. You asked another one of the questions. Who'd you call? Ollie, right? The other day I called Ollie. Like, bear in mind, Ollie's not been in my business for like 2 years now.
Right,
I called
okay.
him, was like, dude, like this is what's going on. I need some help. And well, actually I messaged him and he called me back straight away. I was like, that's awesome. And he said, if you've got any problems, you pass it up. And if Ollie can't do it, he passes it up. And if Mark, which was David's number 2, another one of our investors in the business, couldn't do it, he'll pass it up. What he means is you pass it up to the next person that's above you, pass it up to that peer or a colleague or that individual that you can trust, because that person's probably been through what you're experiencing or has made a mistake similar to you, and they can share your experience. You don't have to deal with it by yourself, and there's no credibility lost. In fact, there's a huge amount of respect gained, because you're showing that you can be humble, you're showing humility, and you're showing that you listen. And they're key attributes to have to be successful in business, and key attributes to have when you're trying to raise investment or appear credible to investors.
Wow, that's a great piece of advice, and a good quote as well. I'm gonna take it with me. Cool. In terms of like those early years again, like throughout the career, throughout your childhood, what sort of skill do you think was one of the key ones that you had developed throughout that time that you thought then became crucial? You mentioned sales, right? So I don't know if you're going to give me that as the answer, but the thing that really helped you build the foundations for the business.
Yeah, so it came from sales, but sales is a really broad term. I think listening. So I remember being at Gartner. When you're at Gartner, you do 6 interviews at the time to get the job. It was mental. And according to Forbes, it was the 3rd hardest place to get a job at the time. And it was intense. And then when you got the job, you had to do a month pass or fire sales school. And if you didn't pass it,
right,
you were fired. That's it, you're gone. Really ruthless. And in that, you go through these sort of round tables, and we had Alan, and I can't remember the other guy, but the other sales sort of assessor. And, they're asking you questions, and I was always taught, if you know the answer, it's going to look good if you put your hand up and answer it. So I'm like, boom, hand up. Duncan, answer the question. Boom, hand up, Duncan, you answer the question. I've done the homework, I've read the book, I've done the revision. And they pulled me aside and said, if you keep doing this, we're gonna let you go. And I was like, what? At the time I was 22. And I was like, I don't understand this. Like, why are they letting me go? I'm answering all their questions correct. And they said, you're not listening. You're not actively listening to your classmates. You're listening to the question, you're answering the question. What we're trying to see from you here is that you can actually take a step back and actively listen to what's going on around you and start to assess the situation and the needs of the people in the room you're in. And that's what I would say is it's take a step back, actively listen. And by actively listening, you can start really understanding what people are wanting to get from you. And if you can address what they want and what they need, and you can provide a solution to that need, then you're in the room.
I can picture so many times just thinking about using that bit of advice, taking a step back to understand the problems and being able to, I think, do a better job in whatever capacity of your business or the job is as well. I wanted to move on to talk about the business now. So it didn't necessarily, if I'm right in saying it, didn't necessarily come up with this big master plan in terms of one day I'm going to leave the sales job and start a business, but there was a particular turning point, that the reason for Brillband existing. A quick pause in the episode. Thank our sponsor for today's episode, dussl. dussl is high-performing, multitasking skincare products with no unnecessary steps. It's just exactly what your skincare needs. If you want to try the dussl range today, use Focus15 for 15% off.
Yeah, so I had I ran a business with my wife called Raising Partners. We ran that. We started that in 2017. 3 years into that, I suffered with stress-induced anxiety and depression through burnout. And so I was diagnosed with that in February 2020 and started therapy in March 2020. Bang, just as lockdown here.
I was going to say.
Yeah. So, and that was an absolute, it was just an absolute firestorm. That's probably the polite way to put it, of emotion. And it was a really scary time. Just loads of stuff going on. Is the world, there was genuine conversations. Is the world going to be the same again? Right. And we were trying to sort things out. And I remember I was able to sort out my energy stuff, check all that's working. You do that on the app or on on a chat. I remember being able to sort out my Starling banking, just in-app chat, bang, done. And then I was internet, when you look at the internet, what are we paying a month? I'm paying £64 a month. And I was like, that's expensive. I've only got 64 megabits per second. The new customer price for customers at the time was 33 quid. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm paying way too much. I tried to call them, couldn't get through. And then I had my first therapy session and the internet wasn't working properly. So the internet went down. At the time I lived in a place called Hazelmere, which is just outside Guildford in the Surrey Hills. And they my Wi-Fi calling was what we relied on, but obviously the Wi-Fi is not working, so the Wi-Fi calling is not working. So I had this sort of really weird patchwork quilt of therapy sessions over like a 2-month period. And at the end of that 2-month period, I got so fed up that I was like, I'm starting a broadband company.
Naturally, that's the next step. And in that moment, what is the emotion you're feeling? Because you're obviously, you're not feeling your best self at that time. You're angry, frustrated. You're probably getting ripped off in a sense. Like, how did that moment feel?
It felt great, to be honest with you, because at the time I felt like I was taking control of my mental health, my situation. And I remember registering the company, and the company was first registered as Project Fair Limited. So, that's what it was. I didn't have a brand name. So it was about making things fair. I just felt like, I still to this day feel like customers are being ripped off by bigger providers. And that's still our mission, is to make broadband fair, transparent, simple. Just work for me, please. And don't mug me off for being a loyal customer. That still sits at the core of everything we do. But yeah, it felt great. And then, there was obviously building the business that came after that.
And from that first step, so you've went, do you know what? Enough of this. I'm starting a broadband business here. Like, this needs to be better. It needs to be a fairer price. Where do you go from there? What is the steps? Because I look at that and I'm like, okay, I could probably, play about with branding and get a marketing plan and position it and stuff. But an actual server, like an actual platform to put it through, like how do you start something like that?
Yeah, that was it was pretty crazy. So first of all, it was like market research. Like, do people even want this? So I did I paid for a survey to be done. So we surveyed 1,500 people, like would you like this? And didn't have a brand name, but like a service that didn't increase your price. What's your frustration? Customer support, price rises were the two key things that came out. What's your most important bill? 30% of Scottish people answered that question, that their broadband was. That was the last bill that they would pay. I didn't want to write back and say, if you don't pay your energy bill, you won't be able to turn your router on. But that's fine. It shows you how important it is to people. So validated. It's not just me feeling like this. And then it was do a financial plan. So it was like, well, how much is it realistically going to cost for connectivity? Like, how am I going to make that work? And so I went and started conversations with BT Wholesale, secured really good commercials. I actually had someone offer to buy the commercials off me that I'd secured. So I didn't even have a business. They wanted to buy the contract that I had.
To interject there, how does that come about? How does somebody know that you've...
Just networking. So I was searching for investors. Right. So, that was also critical. Like, I spoke to so many people in the early days, just LinkedIn requests. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? Not... it has to be really specific and measurable. I'd like 15 minutes of your time to discuss this and this. Like, this is what I'm planning to do. Yeah, I got ignored. I got ignored by most people, but I didn't get ignored by some really successful people. And those people put me in touch with other successful people and other people in industry. And it just sort of, it rolls, and you eventually start speaking to people that really like what you're doing and really have always wanted to do this. And they start just giving you advice. And then all of a sudden you're starting to build up this picture, this market research. You're starting to understand, right, the commercials are X, the number of people I need is Y. These are the mistakes they've made. Don't make these mistakes. So then you put that into your financial model. So that was the next thing, was model it out. Let's see if this can actually work on paper. So many people go and run with a great product idea or a business idea, and they've maybe done a basic 1 year. Like, model it out for 3 years. Have a think about geopolitical situations that may arise. Put that into the model. What happens if X or Y happens? And they soon do that and realize that the problem, that their business isn't viable. And I've spoken to people that have mortgaged their homes on businesses and stuff, and the business is doomed. Like, they're trying to raise investment to save the business, but the business doesn't have a business model that is scalable or investable. So that was really important. And then I had the idea of calling it GOAT for a bit, greatest of all time internet. Couldn't get the name on that. And then there's a clothing store online called GOAT. And then I was sat just playing with Canva. So I was an early adopter of Canva. And I was just like writing on a piece of paper, different combinations. I was like, we want to get band in there so people know it's like something to do with broadband. And then Brillband came up because I was like, brilliant, broadband, done. And then I designed the logo in Canva and it's still the same logo.
Unreal.
And then I put a deck together and off I went. Off I went out to market to then speak to investors.
And how do you get into the rooms of the people that have the ability to invest in your business?
Yeah, knock on the door. Like, you don't ask, you don't get. I think loads of people, are scared to ask those questions. So first of all, put all fear of rejection aside. You're going to get rejected. You're going to hear no more than you are yes. That's life. You're going to hear no more than you are yes. I think that's actually why we have a rise in toxic masculinity. But like, let's park that for a minute.
Yeah.
We are just accept it, and then you have a really good deck, right? I always had this. It used to really frustrate me. I'd see people and they'd be like, yeah, well, I'm not a designer, or I don't know how to use PowerPoint, but I'm really good at business. And it's like, well, you don't go into a Ferrari showroom, right? And then give you a really naff, brochure that looks like it's been drawn in Microsoft Paint and say, yeah, I now want £350,000. Like, you don't do that. You go in there and it's flipping show, right? So I advise genuinely anyone to go into before they build their deck, go into like luxury car showrooms, go into luxury stores and experience that, right? And look at the price tag of the thing people are buying. Look at how much money is being invested to get that amount of money off of somebody, okay? And then make that relative to what you're asking. Because most people are going in first round of investment. I think SEIS is now 250,000. So they're asking for 250,000 off the bat. It's $250,000. Yes, they're going to get 50% of that money back, right, off their tax bill. But you're still asking for 175 grand.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. And that's the money that person could go buy, Ferrari, new home, lend it, loan it. So you've got to make sure that deck is looking spot on, and that you take the executive summary is probably the most important page of your deck. What are you asking for? Because most of these investors are getting thousands of decks a month. Let's try that again. Thousands of decks a month. That's really, you could get that really wrong.
Yeah.
And if you don't get that executive summary right, you're just getting deck sifted. It's just poof, that's what they call it. So they're going through the deck to the side, to the side, to the side, to the side. Most decks aren't even first page. They won't get past it. If you can capture their attention with that first page and you can direct them actually where they're going to look, the next page they're going to look at is the finances. Right? Does this stack up? So you need a nice financial summary in that. Do the numbers add up? Okay, they look cool. They look reasonable and attractive for investment.
Yep.
And then they'll look at team, and then they'll look at problem, solution, all of that stuff. You need that executive summary to really capture the attention and have that ask there on the first page.
Amazing. There you go. There's your 1 minute bit of info to get the best pitch possible.
That's
for
it, honestly.
Investor. And when we're looking at like Brillband and starting that out, you obviously talked there about going for investment. I think when we last spoke, you kind of regretted the way that you went about it. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so I'd say I should have raised more, right? I think, do I regret the way I went about it? It's not that I regret the way that I went about it. I regret that I didn't ask for more money. I should have asked for more money. We needed more money. Do you think you
left it on the table, or do you think you were just
maybe, and maybe there was room to ask for more. Remember, you're partnering with equity at the same time, so you're giving away ownership of your business. Too much equity passed with at the beginning of your journey becomes a lot harder later on. And actually, if you give too much equity away at the beginning of your journey, it might make you uninvestable by bigger funds in the future, because you can lose control of your business very quickly, and you don't want to do that. I think actually, different time now, but if we had the technology that we have now, AI, for example, and I was to not build a broadband company, but I was building a SaaS business, or I was building a product, I'd prove that I've got product market fit and revenue on the table before I went to go and raise money. I raised money for Brillband pre-revenue. There was no revenue. It was me planning on a piece of paper. That was
Right,
it.
okay.
That's all that existed. And it took me nearly 2 years to raise the full 670 odd grand that we raised. Because most of it was just hearing, no, you're mental, or no. You know, it was just, you just get told no a lot. But I got there, and then we made it work. So yeah, I think my advice would be, if you can get revenue generating before needing to go and seek investment, great. And actually, I think AI now enables people to go and become revenue generating and potentially never need to take investment. And if you don't need to take investment, you've got 100% ownership of your business. And also, I tell people, like, what would you when you're selling your company and you own 100% of a £100 million business, great. Or you own 10% of a £1 billion business. What was harder to build? What was harder to make? How much stress did you have to go through to get to each point to walk away with the same amount of money?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation, because I think there's such a, it's spoken about so much about this kind of like chase for like VC funding, and how it's kind of put on this pedestal almost. And I think there's opportunities, particularly here in Scotland, for different grant fundings and stuff that can help you along the way. In terms of, obviously, AI, you can facilitate a large portion of your growth and revenue generation before looking for these things. Do you think there's something in that, in terms of VC funding is maybe not the right way, or at least for some people to go down the route of?
I think VC funding is the wrong way for most people. Like, unless you're going to go build a unicorn and £1 billion business, you don't need VC funding. VCs want £1 billion businesses. It's the only way that they can make money, right? They have to place that money. They have to make those investments. They're in fund cycles. Now, there's ego in that as well. And I think I said that to you when we spoke privately. There was an ego part of it. I've got to go do this because I'm seeing everybody else say that they went and raised VC money. Oh, look how much money I raised. Look how much money I raised. You see the vanity flipping statements on LinkedIn all the time. Oh, I've just raised £100 million. You're like, whoa. And then a part of you goes, oh, well. And at the time I was like, well, that's amazing. And now you give that bitter piece of you that's like, wah. And it depends what mood you're in, really. But yeah, like, if you don't need to raise investment, don't raise investment. Think about what life you want. Think about, and go from there. And just do something you love. Like, I think that's the key thing. Like, I do love doing what I do at Brillband, because it's about making things fair for customers. And that's genuinely the thing that I love most about my job, is I have built something that treats customers fairly. Not all customers think that, like, because you can't please everybody. You'll always have someone that wants more. I want static IP, or, oh, £38 a month's too expensive. Well, sorry, if I charge any more, I'm going to make everybody in the business, but lose their jobs. So it's like, there's things you have to deal with along the way. But if you just hold true to your values, and you build something that you love, and if you can get to revenue, and you sort of set that sort of goal of, well, I want to sell this here, or I'm looking to flip a business quickly, you could build a SaaS business up to 1 mil annual recurring revenue and sell it. Why not? Going to walk away with what, between 3 to 8 mil, depending on the industry and how good the product you've got is. Then do it again. Like, it depends on what you're in it for. And I think lots of people are in it for the glory, the sort of the link. It's weird LinkedIn fame. No one cares. Like, hard lesson I learned, right? No one cares. Right? No one cares. There's always someone else raising more money than you. There's always someone else exiting. It's just no one cares.
Yeah. And what surprised you about, like, going down that route of funding that you weren't expecting?
It sort of brings weird respect. Like, all of a sudden people respect you for doing it. And that's because very few people do, like, in the grand scheme of things, very few people do actually raise VC funding. So it does bring respect, but it's sort of like, what is the respect for? What? Because I got someone to give me some money? Like, respect me for the outcome. Respect me for what I do for my customers. Respect me for what I can bring to the table, not for the fact that I can raise a bit of cash. Yes, it's hard to do. Yes, there is a level of respect to it, but I don't think it's the be all and end all. And then I think it made me realize that, quite a lot of people that are in that world And actually quite a lot of people that are in the startup world in general come from a lot of money. I don't come from huge sums of money. I had to raise this money myself, and I put in my savings to start Brillband. But there's loads of people that are already coming from either multi-millionaire backgrounds. There's Nepo babies that are basically using mummy and daddy's cash. There's all sorts of things out there, right? And unfortunately that tends to be the case, right? There is still a huge problem with people of different backgrounds getting funding in the UK. And that's not just, people of colour, it's not, women, it's not different ethnic and religious backgrounds. It's also like working class people, working class white men, like middle class white men that struggle to break into this realm. It's anyone that really hasn't got a silver spoon. So, I think you have to adapt a little bit to that world as well. Mm-hmm. And I would say you can be, unashamedly yourself. But I think you also do have to be a bit of a chameleon in the room as well. You have to adapt to that room. You have to meet them on a peer level, not necessarily dress like them or, I've turned up to my investment meetings in Air Force Ones. Most of them are in boat shoes or brogues, but like it's...
Do you think that's worth it?
Worth...
Being a chameleon in a room to maybe... satisfy what everyone else thinks needs to be the case, to maybe not be your authentic self?
Depends on what you want to do. I think yes, if you're wanting to get the mission done. Like, I know that sounds really like, I don't know, that sounds like something from SAS Who Dares Wins, right? Like it's like to get the mission done. But yeah, like I think you do. I think it's an invaluable skill. You can be your authentic self afterwards, and it's not necessarily it's not being inauthentic. It's more adapting to your surroundings. So if I'm meeting an investor in a pub, there's a certain way I'm going to carry myself. If I'm meeting an investor in a top London restaurant, there's a certain way I'm going to carry myself. I remember having a meeting with an investor in Coutts, the Queen's Bank. There's a certain way you carry yourself in that building, and that's not being inauthentic. It's actually, I think, being emotionally intelligent to the situation you're in. So I'm not saying be a snake, right? Yeah. I'm not saying, that's not what I'm saying. Don't be slippery. But I'm saying respect your surroundings.
Understand where you are, what the environment is.
Exactly. Because I think we put a lot of emphasis on authentic self, or you can be an authentic human being and you can be authentic to yourself in the actions that you take post your investment conversations.
Yeah, it's just the conscious side of you to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure.
Time and a place type thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think being in the Queen's Bank, that's mad.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, so that was through raising partners. So we did some work with them, supporting them in understanding how to attract entrepreneurs and exited founders. And I worked with some great guys there. So Greg Carl Langford and Thomas Coles, two awesome guys. And they had this big emphasis on we want to attract, people from diverse backgrounds, and we want to, show them that this is a bank that they can bank with. This isn't an old stuffy, upper class white person bank. This is a bank for entrepreneurs. This is a bank for people that challenge the status quo, challenge the norm. And I was actually, whenever I was in London, they were really, really kind. They used to let me work from in there in one of their private booths. So, yes, it sounds stuffy from the outside, and some people have got some very long double-barreled names. But, don't judge a book by its cover. It's a very, very interesting and forward-thinking organisation. And
that's so cool. I think, like, from the outside in, from everything that you've done, it looks like it is a fast growth in terms of business, but kind of building that business in that way, it's very rarely quite a smooth process as such. Yeah. Was there ever a moment where you were thinking, do you know what, this is like, there's no point, or this isn't going to get anywhere, or I'm going to lose everything here?
Yeah, like several. I think that's where you need a good support network. and you need to be able to talk to people outside of that situation. Because I had moments where, yeah, absolutely, I thought it was all done. Like genuinely, at one point I had to make like most of my team redundant. I ran Brillband with 4 people before it was bought by Fern Group, which is Octopus Investments, and APFN, which is the company that actually owns Brillband now, which is All Points Fiber Networks. And in that moment, you know, you're going through all sorts. There were people that genuinely, like, I love the people that work for us and work for me, and it's really hard when you have to have those conversations. That's a conversation. That was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. Was speaking to some of those people and telling them that, you know, it's over, it's done, and they've put everything on the line for you. They're incredibly talented. It's nothing they could have changed, nothing they could do. They're hard conversations. And then there's times where you're running out of money, and you've got, you know, I've got 2 weeks left. It's all going to go wrong. And I've got, you know, thousands of customers, and I've got this, and I've got this bill, and I've got that bill, and you're deferring things, and it's a huge amount of pressure. Huge amount.
And how do you deal with that?
I think therapy. I certainly use therapy.
There's the honest answer. Yeah. I love
that. You know, none of this. Look, it's each their own. I'm not the guy that's getting up at 4 a.m. pretending they're Mark Wahlberg, praying for a bit, going to bed at 7. Yeah, not doing that, right? Like, let's be real. You know, you know, there's a lot of talking to myself and journaling, and yeah, just honestly, like, sitting sometimes and just taking a moment. I'm not on social media, so I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on TikTok. And I stepped away from those when I was like 21, actually. And that was because, no, it wasn't when that's a lie. It wasn't when I was 21. It was when I was 23 and we started raising partners, because I found it too much. I found the pressure too much. Like, this societal pressure that I needed to look a certain way. I needed to be ripped. I needed to have this watch, or have this car, or have this blooming haircut or shoe. Like, all of that became too much. I'm on WhatsApp, just to make it really clear. Like, I'm not. Hang on a minute.
You're not cut off from the world.
Don't worry. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not serial killer.
This guy's got a broadband business and doesn't use social media.
Yeah.
Doesn't use broadband.
Yeah. I use an abacus and I read books and live on an island. But no, it's just, that's one of those things that I found too much. But as I said, I still use WhatsApp and I still talk to people and I still watch YouTube. Like, I am normal. But I just found it too much, like, genuinely. And I know social media's changed since then, but at the time, like, it was Instagram, and it was just pictures of just like people showing off. And that's all it was. And I just felt this huge pressure I felt like I was behind all the time. Like, I felt like I wasn't where that person is, and therefore, well, why am I not there? I need to push myself. And then it was after that I, sort of, and then, as I said, managing the mental health side of things is just talking. It's breathing exercises, it's reflection, it's grounding yourself to what's going on around you.
I think that's amazing. I can think about, you know, a lot of my friends and, you know, myself personally, like, thinking about being in those situations where even in a group setting of our friends, they'll look at each other and they'll be like, oh, look at Nathan, or look at Leo, like, doing so well in their own thing. I feel behind, or whatever. And I think social media plays a large part in that. And I think the example that you've set is a really good one, to think that you don't need to be there. If it's, you know, causing this sort of frustration, or it's hurting you in a certain way, delete it, get it gone. It's not the end of the world. Do you know what I mean? Live your life, be happy. So yeah, I really like that. And another moment that I think personally would be a tough moment is actually selling the business.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was like mourning. That was like grief, because I'd put so much, everything into making that work. And some of the like, I remember again, I've talked about hard conversations, talking to your investors and telling them that, yeah, it's not happening. And you're talking to guys that put 500 grand in each, right? Like, and having to, and I said to you, I don't hide from things, don't disappear. So I picked up the phone or, messaged, can we jump on a Zoom chat? I don't hide. Let's put the cameras on. Let's do this properly. And to have those investors say thank you, that was amazing. It was hard, but then amazing, because those investors knew how hard I'd worked. They knew I'd done everything, and there was a number of things. Right, it was 2024. We'd gone through 4 prime ministers. We'd had Liz Truss, we had Boris Johnson, then we had Liz Truss turbo the economy. Then we had Rishi Sunak.
I'm just getting a montage of prime ministers dancing in my head.
Well, yeah, we probably could make that on AI. Just throw it into this video right now. But yeah, it's just mad. And like the world really changed, and they were like, "There's nothing you could have done, mate." And the goalpost kept changing because the world was changing. So like, I needed to get to 1 mil annual recurring revenue for people to invest in us, and they were like, "No, it's 3 mil now." That's what the funds did. She's like, "Well, we've just got to like 1 mil annual recurring revenue." Like, what do you mean it's now changed to 3 mil? I can't get to 3 mil. Like, I can't do it. I need cash. And I'd been running 2 horses, so I had sort of, you talked about mental health, you talked about one of the things I said was reflection. I always take myself away and I think about different scenarios and situations. I don't worry them, because that's the worst. That's what builds your anxiety, is the what ifs, the what ifs, the what ifs, the what ifs, and you end up in some crazy cycle. Did that before. That ended up in me like crying on the kitchen floor. but didn't do that this time. And it was like, what if I don't raise investment? How do I protect how do I protect the people? How do I protect the people's jobs? Then it was, how do I protect our customers? How do I protect my investors? And then it was me, right? And I made nothing selling the business, sold it all. Like, it's gone. I'm not a shareholder in the business anymore. They were very clear though that the sale wouldn't go through if I didn't remain part of the business. And so they bought me basically, and they bought the vision and they bought the team that I've built. And I now see this as an amazing opportunity to learn, to grow, to heal, and then I'll work out what my next entrepreneurial thing will be.
Yeah, it's really inspirational. And I think like a lot of time people think, when you're selling a business, this guy's made it. He's where's his Bentley parked? Like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good to see like the other side when you're doing things differently, how the type of structure of your business can leave you for when you're exiting, or certain circumstances, geopolitical things have an impact on business. So I think that's a really, really good point for people when they're thinking about their business, the type of funding, the way you go about things, and things to consider when selling. In terms of moving on to like the last wee section here, community questions. So Focus on Founders is a business community. So it's business owners, all levels, who come together. Everyone in that community is a mentor and a mentee. So they're there to learn and they're there to give. They ask questions every time I release who the next podcast guest is. And they've came up with a couple here. So I'm going to run through some of them. Okay,
right, cool.
Hope you're ready. So the first one is, how has fatherhood changed how you define success?
That's a great question. Look, turning up for my kids is number one. I build everything around them. It took my like time management from being pretty loose and working late nights to I can do my job. Not 9 to 5 in my job doesn't really exist, right? Mm-hmm. But I can do my working day 9 till 5. Now, if I need to pick up the phone post bedtime, absolutely I can do that. But 9 to 5 is like pretty much I can get the working day done, and then I'm there for my kids. I do pick up. I take pride in taking my son to football. So yeah, that's absolutely like 100%.
Perfect. The second question we have here, kind of touched on it there, but what does balance actually look like in practice when running a business?
I think making sure that you don't bring your work home with you is really important. And what I mean by that is you don't bring it into your marriage, you don't bring it into, your children's lives, and you have a clear demarcation point. And you could do that, it depends on your living setup. So it might be a room. There's one room that you work in. Mm-hmm. I know people that will sit on their laptop in bed, or they'll sit on the sofa with their laptop. But what you're doing is you're actually starting to blur the lines. And I know consciously you're not seeing that, but I think subconsciously that starts to leak. Your work starts leaking into those different areas. And then, I think really just balancing time as well for social. And when you talk like this, it's like, where do I find the social side? Where do I do that? And it's like going to the gym with your mates. Like on a month, I go to the gym with my mates on a Monday, for example, and we go to Old Salties on Byers Road, which is, for those that don't live in Glasgow, is an amazing chippy stroke Italian restaurant, stroke does everything.
Here's a plug, let's get a sponsor.
Yes, Old Salties. After I come from the gym group. I'm not actually being paid by these brands. We go in there and we sit and we chat, right? And it's just showing up for each other. We've talked, we just talk, right? Mm-hmm. But that demarcation point is really important. Create some rules, don't break them. And if you start breaking them, reassess, why am I breaking them? Because you've got to have boundaries.
Yeah, that's a brilliant piece of advice. And I know the person who sent that in personally, and I think they're trying to work out and figure out a lot of that stuff. So it's really good advice.
I'll go for a coffee with them. Just set me up with them separately, and I'm happy to go for a coffee with them.
Amazing. The last one we'll get from the community. What's one industry myth founders should ignore?
Industry from telecoms or just startup land?
Startup land.
VC equals success. It's a myth. Doesn't exist. That's not true. You will be the person that will make your business successful, and success doesn't necessarily mean money. Success is growth within yourself and within your ability to do what you do best.
Amazing. Final question. Every guest on the podcast gets asked this. When people talk about your work 10 years from now, what do you hope that they say?
Wow. He's a stand-up guy. No, genuinely, that's it. That, what would be really important for me is that they saw me as an honest operator, someone that improved the skill set of those around him, gave people opportunity, and then on a personal level, showed up for his kids.
Amazing. Perfect. Thanks, Duncan.
No, pleasure, man. Thank you, Matthew.
Hey, it's Fraser from dussl here. Before you go, I just wanted to hop on and say a quick thank you. Thank you so much to Matthew and the Focus on Founders team for having dussl as part of this journey. dussl was built in Glasgow around the mission to protect your skin for life. And to me, what that means is small daily habits that actually make a difference when it comes to your overall skin health and will help you in the long run. If you want to find out more about dussl, you can at dussl.com and use code FOCUS15 for a discount. Future you says thanks.
Duncan, thank you for your time and honesty and for sharing the real story. For anyone listening, you can find Duncan and Brillband down in the show notes of this episode. Thank you for listening to Focus on Founders again. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe and feel free to share this episode with someone that needs that extra push to get going on their dreams. Until next time.